fellow Americans.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
A functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They're 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal health care. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a programme for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals
So
are
do
not
you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you to guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
Radical colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth. And that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Welcome into Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton, along with our flight attendant, Natali, who'll be...
Stop it.
No, I'm Clayton Morris. This is Natali Morris. Good to see all of you.
Is that what we're doing? We're going to make fun
Redacted.
of other people's wardrobes?
Yes. Can you make fun of mine? You're the one that was making fun of it, said you looked like a flight attendant.
My mom said that.
Oh, okay.
And so... Yeah.
Yes,
but
I think you look lovely.
Open it up for other people to make fun of me too.
What do you think she looks like? Let us know on this Thursday.
I do feel like the dress is a little coal miner's daughter, but I'm wearing it.
I was like, we were saying beforehand, like she's going to break into song tonight. Like,
exactly.
Jang, dang, dang, went the trolley.
All right.
If you can't make fun of yourself, might as well not even live anymore.
It doesn't bother me at all.
We've got a very busy show for you on this Thursday. Welcome in. And I should say at the top here, our goal right now, we're closing in on 1.5 million subscribers here on the channel. So please, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. We try to cut through the propaganda. So please smash that like button at the start of the show and subscribe, whether you're watching us on Rumble, whether you're watching us on YouTube or on Twitter. All of those places. So we've got a busy show. We're going to talk about this big declaration from Vladimir Putin laying out these conditions on under which circumstances he would use nuclear weapons, because the West continues to provoke and fire long-range weapons into Russia. We also got some really interesting details about troop mobilization, and all of this comes on a day when we get the release of Brittney Griner, who is, of course, a WNBA player who was arrested in Russia, a prisoner swap, and there's a big backlash this afternoon on, well, did we really get a fair swap in this prisoner thing? We're going to talk about that.
Plus, we are going to talk about the end of vaccine mandates in the military, why it may be a baby step, and why Democrats even agreed to it, because they continue to want you to be mandatory for you to have vaccines.
Yeah, we're also going to talk about the new Twitter files and some of the details in those Twitter files released from the first tranche of these things. Some really interesting details as it relates to the CDC and COVID censorship on Twitter, specifically having comments about certain things as it relates to the vaccine could have gotten you stopped down, and how active the CDC was in this censorship.
Plus, the last two stories we're doing today, we are going to do exclusively on Rumble and Twitter, because they are stories that we are not quite sure about delivering on YouTube, and we're just not comfortable taking that risk. The first one is an update on the baby who whose parents wanted a blood transfusion from unvaccinated blood only. We're going to give you an update on that. We are also going to talk about phalloplasty. What that is the construction of a male phallus on someone who was not born with one, who was instead born with a clitoris. I'm going to be saying that word a lot. So come on over to Rumble if you want, because we're going to talk about how researchers are trying to do this.
Be careful.
Okay, all right.
Be careful. We can't say it here. On YouTube, you'll be censored and blocked for stuff like this.
Okay, so come to Rumble.
On Rumble,
we're going to have a party and talk about genitals. I'm ready. I've been practicing all day saying these words without giggling.
Your genitals
in the
mirror.
I did
mirror.
not think in my whole lifetime that I would get a genital party on my birthday.
Yeah.
That's right. We buried the lead. It's David's birthday.
We hid the salami on that story. Are you uncomfortable? Redacted starts right now. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well on this Thursday. Welcome into the show. Nearing the holidays here. Welcome to our inviting studio here with our Christmas tree. We threw another Yule log on the fire right before the show. It's starting to get hot in here. Can you feel that heat? It's starting to get heated. It's starting to get hot in here. So welcome in. It's going to get hot tonight. We have a daily newsletter that we'd love for you to subscribe to. It's totally free, and all the cool kids are doing it. Again, I was at the mall today doing some Christmas shopping, and some of the kids, I overheard them in the food court. And they were talking about the Redacted newsletter.
Did you see this, bruh?
And I walked up and I said, "You guys are talking about the Redacted newsletter?" They're like, "Yeah. Do you know about it?" I'm like, "Do I know about it? I'm the maker of the Redacted newsletter. It's totally free. Just go to Redacted.inc. It's totally free. You can sign up. You'll get a nice newsletter first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee. You can enjoy it. Read it in about 5-10 minutes. It'll get you caught up on some of the news of the day that we're covering. Natalie does the great writing of it. I do some editing and add some of the funniness in it. All of the jokes from me. And then we...
not true.
I know it's not true.
The funny headlines and the photos are from Clayton.
Yeah.
He's good with the 1-2 punch.
It's a good collaboration. We write it over coffee in the morning, and we hope we put it out to you and the world, and you can enjoy it for free. So any other things you want to tell them about the community before we get into the stories?
Yes, you can join our community at the same website where you can join our newsletter. It's redacted.inc. For a small monthly fee, you can get access to exclusive content from us, as well as be a part of our community, where we are trying to build something that we own rather than being dependent on these media platforms that we use right now.
So just a couple of housekeeping items before we start. So someone was saying in the chat, why is Rumble faster than YouTube? Because we're streaming in 4K. We're the first independent news show to stream in 4K on YouTube. Rumble is not yet, can't handle 4K just yet. So we're streaming, I believe, in 1080 on Rumble.
That's correct.
So the speed with which you might get the content over on Rumble is going to be a little bit faster. So anyway, just wanted to point that out.
So later when we do the switch, when we shut down the stream on YouTube and we make sure that you can follow us on Rumble, we'll wait just a few minutes and I will perform a little number for you. No, I won't.
A little song and dance. Yeah, that's our website for Rumble. Go to rumble.com/redacted to become a follower of our Rumble channel over there, because they are a censorship-free platform. So they do not censor speech. So we will be moving over there for the last two stories on the show today.
All right. And one more time, happy birthday to David.
Yes, happy birthday,
Philip's
David.
was yesterday. David's is today. Our brother's birthday week. Yeah, they are Sagittarius. Sagittarii.
So we know what time of the year that your mom liked to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
All right.
Am I allowed to say that?
I'll ask her.
Yeah, you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to suggest it. I'm allowed to know what you're talking about.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about the latest in Ukraine. So we have a couple of major pieces that we want to cover tonight, because we have a major prisoner swap that we're going to talk about. We got an update just a short time before our show came on the air from the White House on that piece of the story. They're getting slammed at this hour over it. We have a new round of sanctions from Europe, because that's great, because your energy bills aren't high enough already. I put out a poll earlier, have you noticed any change in your energy bills thanks to Russian sanctions? I think our poll is at 90% of you have now said that you've seen a major change in your energy bills. So this is affecting all of us. And we're also going to look at the threat of nuclear war, what Vladimir Putin said on that. And the U.S. doesn't want to know where the money is going in Ukraine. So a lot of that. So let's get to the first piece of this, which is the nuclear threat. So a major update now. And, I think a lot of people are saying, well, are we slow marching towards nuclear Armageddon? That's the question. Vladimir Putin has laid out his conditions on nuclear war, what his plans are if he's continued to be provoked. He says, I will not launch nuclear weapons. I'm not going to be the first to do that, nor would I want to be the second to do that. But we will, under all circumstances, defend our territory if we are continued to be hit by long-range weapons from the West. And we continue to hit long-range weapons from the West. So, what the hell are we doing? We are literally asking for this. So he was asked by a reporter under what circumstances this would happen. And so over the past 24 hours, he's been very candid about this war. We've got a lot of troop updates from him. We've got a lot of movements of when the next stage of this mobilization is going to happen. And we got this. Watch.
Regarding threats of nuclear war, Svetlana Gennadievna, you are right, this threat is growing. There is nothing to hide here. Regarding the fact that under no circumstances will Russia strike first, if it does not strike first under any circumstances, then it will not strike second either, because the possibilities of a nuclear strike on our territory are very limited. However, our strategy is to consider nuclear weapons, and they are weapons of mass destruction, as a means of protection. It is all set up around the so-called retaliatory oncoming strike. Did we talk about the possibility of using nuclear weapons? No. The former Prime Minister of Great Britain, let us not mention her by name, also directly publicly said that she was ready to do it. In response to this, I had to emphasize some things too. Right away, her statements were ignored, and what we said was immediately stuck out, and the statements were used to frighten the whole world. We haven't gone crazy. We are aware of what nuclear weapons are. We have these means, and they are in a more advanced and more modern form than any other nuclear country. This is an obvious fact today, but we are not going to brandish this weapon like a razor running around the world. But of course, we proceed from the fact that it is.
So, the saber rattling here, I mean, I think this is what we're doing. We really, it's amazing because some video emerged today from 2015, and it showed, British soldiers training Ukrainian soldiers in Britain. And one of the questions from the Russian government is why in 2015 would there have been a need for the UK to be actively training Ukrainian soldiers, 22,000 of them in 2015? It's long before this war started. So they've been actively provoking and pushing. And we now know, without a doubt, of course, it's a NATO war and it's a NATO provocation. And we're continuing to send weapons. Russia announced today that it had destroyed 5 HIMARS that we've sent there. I think we've sent a total of 17 of them, so they've destroyed 5 of them now.
Well, if you look at the Minsk
millions
Accords,
in taxpayer dollars down the toilet.
Looking at the Minsk Accords, Putin has been wanting this to be a peaceful thing all along. But we kept antagonizing them. Then they went against and dropped those accords. They didn't adhere to them.
Or exist,
so I don't even know. At this point, what is he supposed to do? If this was the United States, we already would have annihilated them.
Yeah. Oh, you mean in Ukraine? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the next stage of this. It's okay, so now we've had these long-range attacks on electrical infrastructure, which Ukraine has said now that Russia has hit over 1,000 times in the past few weeks. 1,000 times. So Putin, I love this clip because, last night was a holiday in Russia. Putin is drinking some champagne, and it's he wandered over to the cameras, and he doesn't usually just off the cuff give conversations Mr. President, will you come over here and speak?
Yeah.
So he's just got a glass of champagne, and he's yeah, you got some cameras there? I'm drinking. I'll answer some questions. I'll be frank with you. And this is kind of a frank moment from Putin. Watch this.
Сейчас много шума по поводу наших ударов по энергетической инфраструктуре соседней страны. Да, мы делаем это. Но кто начал? Кто ударил по мосту?
So if you're watching this driving, he's saying, who struck the Crimean Bridge? Who blew up the power lines in the Kursk nuclear plant?
Станция Курск.
Who does not supply water to Donetsk, he said. Not supplying water to a city of 1 million people is an act of genocide.
Акт геноцида. Никто,
So he said at the beginning, we didn't start this, they did. No one has ever said a word about all of that. Complete silence, he says. And as soon as we make a move, we do something in response to help those people, basically. Outrage at us, shouting at our entire universe. This will not interfere with our combat goals.
Sheesh.
So 1,000 times. And now he also, frankly, in a separate interview, was talking about troop movements. He said, you know, they're like, well, you're going to now need another mobilization of troops, 300,000. He's like, no, let me explain something. And he went into great detail about where all 300,000 are positioned, how only a fraction of them are even on the front ready now. The others are in training, a lot of them in training facilities at the Ministry of Defense.
In fact, the U.S. State Department just confirmed this early over the weekend when we saw Antony Blinken on the Sunday shows. He said, I don't think they're going to need to mobilize again because they have barely moved the ones they've got.
Yeah, so
the United States knows this.
Yeah, and of course, Antony Blinken also this weekend said they're not winterized. Like these guys, that was my favorite quote of like the month. Antony Blinken's
Right.
like, yeah, these Russian soldiers. He's like, they're the worst of the worst. They're not prepared. They're losing.
They're not well trained.
And they're not winterized. He said they're not ready for winter. To which I said, look, Russia invented winter.
Yes.
This is why people don't win when they go into Russia. They lose because they sort of own winter. And then we saw a video over the past 24 hours of Russian troops in active combat training in Belarus, in snow, digging trenches and moving tanks through snow piles. So and they often got their white snow uniforms on. It's like reminds me of like the G.I. Joe. Remember the G.I. Joe figures where they were like in the snow uniform? Like, oh, you got the white, the snow version of G.I. Joe.
Or the Star Wars when they're in the
like the snow troopers.
Gear.
Yeah. So they're ready.
Well,
they are
Siberia,
winterized.
Like Siberia, that's in Russia. Isn't that like a winter scape almost? Like it's like you can't survive there.
It's like a hellhole. Yeah.
If you're Siberia is like the comment for like permanent cold.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're afraid. I'm going to send you to Siberia. You know?
I had when I was at CBS, I had a hairdresser that was from Siberia who moved to
Holy
New York, and
smokes.
she was like, "This is not cold in the depth of winter.
Yeah.
We'd be freezing." And she's like, "No, this is not cold. In Siberia, you walk
She's in
from
a summer dress.
your car to your. She would be in winter from like your car to the building, and your hair freezes like an icicle."
Liquor giant in our Rumble chat says GI Vanilla Gorilla. Yeah, but I remember those, like the G.I. Joes, like they were in the white uniforms because they were like snow prepared. You're like, oh, you got the snow version of G.I. Joe. That's what these troops were wearing, training right now in Belarus. They are winterized and ready. My point is that we haven't even seen the start of the mobilization yet. And he explained where these troops are positioned. So we'll see over the coming weeks, post-Christmas, what happens here. Meanwhile, this from Dave DeCamp, one of our favorite websites is antiwar.com. He tweeted this a short time ago. He said, I had to do a double take on this one. Cluster bombs are indiscriminate. All this would do is make sure more civilians are killed. CNN article exclusive. Biden administration is weighing Ukrainian requests for access to U.S. stockpile of controversial cluster munitions. That's great. Yeah, just give them whatever we got. Want to kill more civilians? There you go. Meanwhile, the head of...
I guess those little butterfly-shaped things aren't enough anymore.
The pedal bombs?
The ones they were scattering, the ones they were scattering.
Can you
through
clarify
town.
what you mean by cluster munitions?
They're not precise. It's just meant to be like throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping things stick. It's not precise.
It's a bomb. It's a bomb that goes off in the air and then drops like hundreds of thousands of smaller bombs over the like an area. So it's like it's definitely not precise.
Right. It's I'm just going to see if I can find some images of what they look like here. Yeah, they're filled with these like.
Oh, for goodness sake!
You know, these are of course older, but like this is they're filled with. So of course when they go off, here's an example. You know, you can see what a cluster bomb looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, well, we're just going to hit wherever.
Yeah.
So we'll take out as many civilians as possible because we know how they've been great with civilians so far. All you need to do is look at Donbass and see how they've been with civilians. So,
well, and when you say they, be clear that that's Ukraine, not Russia. Like,
yes, I should be clear.
I don't want people to think that Russia is doing that because they're not.
Yes. So, and we know that, and that's what Putin was saying, of course, about what's unfolded in Donetsk, right? getting rid of, of course, attacks there, but also the water supply and everything else. So, and we've had a number of reporters who've been in the Donbass recently, and of course, the attacks continue. They have continued all weekend in the Donbass. Meanwhile, the sanctions piece of this, so we should talk about that. The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that the 9th package of sanctions is now ready to go. Woohoo! 200. So here's the breakdown of these new sanctions, as if they were working so far. 200 Russian citizens and companies will be blacklisted. That's on the new sanctions. 3 Russian banks will be sanctioned. Russia's access to drones will be restricted. New export restrictions on all dual-use goods, electronics, technology used primarily for military purposes will be blacklisted or sanctioned, as well as sanctions against the mining sector. Oh, there we go. They know their mining sector, because they need those. They absolutely need to build up their own precious minerals in Europe, and they need a ban on broadcasting of 4 Russian TV channels. Here's Ursula. Listen.
Russia continues to bring death and devastation to Ukraine. It is deliberately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. It is seeking to paralyze the country at the beginning of the winter. But we stand by Ukraine, and we will make Russia pay for its cruelty. The 8 packages of sanctions that we have issued so far are already biting hard. But today, we are stepping up the pressure on Russia with a 9th package of sanctions. First, we are proposing to add almost 200 additional individuals and entities.
So I went through all of those things. So that's the announcement. The Western media is hiding all of the protests. So yes. You were in Germany this weekend and noticed a number of protests.
Not at all hard to find. I thought that they would just be in the major cities like Berlin and Munich. I was in a very small city in the south of Germany called Freiburg. Yeah. And yeah, it was like right in the center of Christmas markets. And some of them looked a little antagonistic, but not really. It was like people, they looked really normal people with really well-organized signs that just said, stop sanctions, it hurts people. It absolutely does when you think of the things that you are used to living with that you're not used to living without. I was reading a book over the weekend about Syria specifically, and how this sanctions that the United States put on Syria, some people call sanctions of mass destruction, because when you think about how then you can't get antibiotics for your baby or things that you actually need to survive, like in Syria, those sanctions killed millions of people. We're about to see, because the winter solstice hasn't hit yet, how this winter will do without the trade of goods that we're used to, and whether or not these also will be sanctions of mass destruction.
So I'm sure if you tuned into the media the following day in those towns of Freiburg, like it probably wasn't even in the newspapers or not, the Western media has been ignoring these protests all over Europe. They're being blocked on social media, but we are not censoring here on this show. We don't do that. We show you the truth. So here is Stuttgart, Germany. Last night, thousands of people protesting, Olaf Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen, against these Russian sanctions. Take a look. They're saying that these... So what they're saying is we don't want to freeze. We don't want to starve for Zelensky. And of course, the German media isn't really covering this.
I was driving by one guy who had a big, sanction, like stop-in sanctions. Mm-hmm. And I rolled down the window and I went like this. So I was like,
give him a big thumbs up.
Yes, I support the protest. I don't think sanctions are going to do anything at all. The friend that I was with, she was like, what are they chanting? Because they were saying something about supporting Nazis, about not doing that. And I was like, they literally already had a war about this. They feel like they do not need to have another one.
Right. So Europeans have energy prices that have more than doubled. I mean, let us know in the chat, like where you are in the world. Are you in Europe? Are you in the United States? I mean, energy prices have in some places tripled. Let us know if you've experienced this in the chat right now, on Rumble, on Twitter, here on YouTube, wherever. the dinging is exactly the case. Just let us know what your thoughts are. Where have you seen energy prices? Europeans have seen energy prices more than double, even triple in some parts, thanks to your bonehead sanctions. They haven't worked. In fact, The Guardian today, look at this article. The ruble is soaring. Putin is stronger than ever. Our sanctions have backfired. Yeah, they backfired. So this is from Simon Jenkins. They announced sanctions. They also announced another $2 billion to Ukraine. That's from Europe. We still have no idea where the money is going, by the way, inside Ukraine. Wouldn't you love to know where that money is going? Well, Congress in the United States isn't interested. No major news stations are covering the story. They're ignoring it.
Or they're taking another opportunity to hit at Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yes. This was her bill. And remember back, of course, at the beginning of this, in the spring, when Senator Rand Paul said, we're not going to I'm not going to go along with this next round of funding defense bill unless we have an audit put in place. And he was, of course, he wasn't allowed to get that motion on the table.
It died in the water.
It died. So now Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican, has come forward with her own bill on this, and it's not going to happen. It got voted down. So Democrats stepped in and said, no, we don't want to be auditing this. And the reason we don't want to audit, get this, is that number one, it would send a signal, they say, to Ukraine that we're not interested in helping them anymore. And the second reason, they said, is that, no, an audit is just Russian propaganda. Oh, so it's Russian propaganda to find out where our money is going? Literally, a member of Congress, a sitting member of Congress said that out loud, that this is Russian propaganda to want to audit the amount of billions that are going there. And of course, my immediate conspiracy theory brain goes to thinking about FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried and wanting to know where the money flowed. And they don't want it flowing. They don't want to show where it flowed.
Yes.
In fact, yesterday, Maxine Waters, who would be investigating the FTX thing, was like, no, you don't need to testify. We don't need to have you come up. We don't need to subpoena you and come up and testify.
Well, she clarified later on Twitter and said, it's on the table, is what she said.
Wouldn't he be the one? I mean, who else do you need? We're going to ask just other people. But Sam, you just enjoy the Bahamas.
You're having a hard month. We don't feel like we need to put this on you right now.
Could you imagine if it was Trump or any of the Trump clan? I mean, they would all be hauled in there. They'd be arrested, broken in at 6 a.m. at their house, and frog marched out.
Well, exactly where they don't want to look is where we should want to look.
Yes.
And, as someone who, look, this is the beginning of the month. I just balanced my checkbooks, in order to know what we have to spend for the rest of the month for Christmas. And I don't understand how you just run a budget without keeping track of what you've done.
Right.
I don't understand this.
Well, no, this is how government operates. I can't understand it either. And one little acre in our chat says, wait a minute, an audit is Russian propaganda? Can I tell that to the IRS? Yeah.
You don't need to know that's a great point.
That's a great point.
That's my favorite.
I'm sending all of my money to Putin this year, so I'm just not going to send it to the IRS because I believe in, or I'm sending it to, sorry, not to Putin.
To Zelensky.
To Zelensky.
It's going to be a new Christmas song.
A big slap in the face to all of us is on Time Magazine this year.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Person of the year.
Thanks for that.
Person of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This year, I'm sending all my money to, yeah. So Marjorie Taylor Greene explained why she put this bill forward and what this audit was all about. Listen.
I would like to announce that I've introduced a privileged resolution, and what this will do is it will hold our government accountable for all of the funding for Ukraine. So I want to talk about that a little bit at the end, but let me explain the situation we have here. Congress has appropriated $54 billion to aid in the Ukrainian conflict. And then our president, Joe Biden, has requested another $38 billion this week. With the money we've sent to Ukraine, we could have already secured our border, but we're not doing that. We're ignoring the dangers happening at our border and the national security crisis that's happening in our country while we are completely protecting another country's border and also waging a proxy war with Russia.
Oh, and also, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And also, We're waging a proxy war. Well, here's another version.
I mean, the members of the military in this new defense budget, which we're going to talk about in a second, are only getting about 4.6% of a raise. That is not commensurate with inflation. So we're not really taking care of our own military. We're sending this all to get blown up in Ukraine and have no accounting for it.
Yeah, and of course, and also on the vaccine front. So we force vaccines on them and don't give them a raise. That's what we do with our military. Mm-hmm. So the White House is being slammed over this prisoner swap, which is another big piece of this Ukraine story today. So we learned this afternoon that Brittney Griner, the WNBA player, who was arrested and held in Russia on drugs charges, broke the law in Russia and held on drug charges, is now a part of this prisoner swap. So now she's free. And it's very bizarre because President Biden playing right into Putin's hand, basically, is what the argument is here. Brittney Griner is free as part of this prisoner swap. And now, Putin gets back a person who is, his nickname is the Merchant of Death. That's the guy's nickname, Viktor Bout. He's considered the Merchant of Death. He's a Russian arms dealer.
Okay. Who
is actively targeting American soldiers. So what kind of message does that send? We'll take Brittney Griner. We're going to give you an arms dealer who was actively targeting American soldiers. And that's a fair swap. Meanwhile, we have, I think, Paul Whelan, who I think is a Marine still. So there's a lot of arguments here. Like, Paul was arrested first, is being held by Russia first. Why is he not the first choice to get out? And then Brittney Griner is the one because it's a political. The optics of it just stink to me. Doesn't it? I mean, to anybody else, it does to me.
Depends who you are, because there's a lot of people on Twitter who are Biden supporters who feel like this is a big win for the Biden administration.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think those people are sort of weighing these consequences of military personnel versus this person who has high visibility, who has star power, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, and, Jean-Pierre was asked this question today, and she was like backpedaling. And she's like, look, he's been focused on this, and she would not answer questions. Like, Peter Doocy followed up and asked her the question on, well, why did we get such a bad deal on this? Like, why did we get the short end of the stick on this? Here's a guy who's actively targeting American soldiers. He's an arms dealer, and we're sending him back to Putin in the middle of a war? Like, when we're putting in all of these other, like, Doocy didn't ask this part of it, I'm asking this part of it, but we have all these sanctions to really weaken Putin's hand during a quote unquote war, and we're giving him an arms dealer
right.
who, aids his war effort, basically. I don't know. He also, called the Merchant of Death for gun running. There's a movie about the guy, a 2005 movie about the guy, so... the thing about Trump got North Korea to release 3 American hostages, and we didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to give them anything in return. It was just a show of goodwill.
Do we have North Korean prisoners to swap?
I don't know. I don't know who we've got locked up. I mean, just go to Guantanamo. We've got a lot of people locked up in that prison.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the new defense bill, there is information about Guantanamo as well. And, seems that's the status quo there.
So the other question I have about this Brittney Griner thing is on the marijuana. It's on the drug charge here, right? Because in the United States, this was a big part of Biden's campaign promise, right? Was to release people in the United States that had drug infractions.
Yes.
Right? And so I can't wrap my head around how it's okay for him to push for that in Russia, but not in the United States. Do you follow me?
That he wants her to be decriminalized for marijuana.
Like, she just had marijuana and she was arrested. And she was going to serve 7 years in Russia, so let's get her out.
But he has not done the same.
But there's people serving for minor marijuana infractions in the United States that are serving 12 years or 30 years. So these people are behind bars in the United States for like the same thing or less.
But they're not visible.
They're not visible, of course. They're not NBA. They're not WNBA players who break the law and do this. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I just find it compelling, and there's a lot of different angles to it that I think, it's I don't know. It's interesting. We've got more news to get to here on this Thursday. We do indeed.
Yes. We're going to talk about vaccine mandates for the military and how that was sort of shoved into the defense bill. We are also going to talk about the Twitter files and how they relate to the CDC. And then we are going to end the stream on YouTube and head over and talk about the update about the baby whose parents want unvaccinated blood for a transfusion that the baby needs, plus some gender reassignment surgeries that they're calling gender affirming surgeries. What that means, do you want this near your genitals? Come on over to Rumble and see about it.
Yeah, so we'll be live on Rumble, so you got to make sure you set up your account on Rumble. Rumble.com/redacted is where we will do some exclusive content because we can't do it on YouTube. We will be censored and blocked, and Rumble doesn't do that. But first, I want to tell you about our friends at Manscaped because 'tis the season for clean balls. Fa la 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 la.
Speaking of balls.
La la la. Our friends at Manscaped, which have the greatest sense of humor of any company, are helping you clear your driveway for some safe travels this holiday season. From stocking stuffers to white elephants, Manscaped's products are at the top of every wish list. Grab some crop mops for your pops or some body buffers for the holiday lover. Win this year's White Elephant gift and help all of the men in your life go from eggnog to nice hog this December by going to manscaped.com and using the code REDACTED to get 20% off and free shipping. 20% off with that code REDACTED. If you're going to order one of these for, grandpa or your dad or maybe your son getting some new underwear, they sell fantastic underwear, by the way. Don't let their chestnuts roast in the wrong boxer shorts. Give them a pair of Manscaped boxers, specially made to keep the area cool and provide holiday comfort all year round. I love their boxers. They're fantastic. Now that you've gifted them the perfect privates, go beyond the groan with Manscaped's full body product line. We all, I think, had somebody in our family, like my dad and other people, that would have like some extra nose hairs or ear hairs. I think we all know those people, right? Well, the Shears 2.0 is their full kit for nail care with scissors, clippers, tweezers, and a file for the traveling man. Give Pops like this little gift. It's like subtly drop it into his Christmas stocking. If you're still using a loofah, introducing the body buffer. Loofahs actually hold bacteria from dead skin. Help them throw out that disgusting old loofah. Get them the body scrubber that feels smoother but acts tougher. And lastly, top off their stocking with the crown jewel for the family jewels, the Lawnmower 4.0. The electric razor's advanced skin-safe technology is a life changer and known for reducing nicks and cuts on Santa's sack. Manscaped is here to make holiday shopping a blast by giving products the love and make them laugh. Get 20% off and free shipping with code REDACTED at manscaped.com. And use the code REDACTED. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code REDACTED, Manscaped, for a perfect gift that will be the holidays' biggest hit. Our thanks to them for supporting the show. We love these guys. They've been with us now for over a year supporting independent journalism. So thank you to our sponsors who support what we do here. We couldn't do it without them. It helps for us to take care of our staff members here on the show, pay for the server for us to stream in 4K and all of those things. So thanks to Manscaped for helping support our show. When you support them, you support us. So thank you for that. All right, let's talk about the military.
Okay. Well, the U.S. military is still required to have updated COVID vaccines or else. But that may change soon under the new defense budget bill. This is a really strange way to remove these mandates, but okay.
No, it's not. Can I stop you there for a second?
Well, we're going to talk about the sort of trade-off. But
okay, no. What I'm just saying is they always shove crap in these these bills, these defense authorization bills, like that have nothing. Well, this one specifically does, but they're always like tangentially related, and then they do this for political reason to score political points at the last minute.
Yes. True. Now, as a reminder, the vaccine mandate has taken its toll on the military. Listen to how fighter pilot John Bowles put it. He was grounded because he would not take the vaccine. He spoke to Clayton earlier this week.
This is not a good order of discipline issue anymore, and I think everyone knows that. These people like myself and the tens of thousands of others who said, I don't know about this vaccine. I don't think I want to take it. We're not criminals, but we've been made to feel like it. We're not extremists, but we've been made to feel that way. We're not radicals, but we've been made to feel that way. And that's really where I think the damage has been done. And I'm sure everyone's aware of the Atlantic article recently of pandemic amnesty. I think there should be responsibility for the actions taken for those who did legitimately break the law and knew they broke the law. But that's not my place here as a military member. I'm here to say that at the very least, let's start rebuilding as a military. Let's start building trust in each other, because this is not how teams treat each other at all. And, we're just using the processes that were afforded to us by our own military, by our own Constitution, which is what we swore to defend. We're doing exactly what we were told to do, which is support and defend the Constitution and stand up for our rights and liberties, because we don't lose those when we join the military. So that's my message, I guess, to the American people and to my leadership, is that, let's rephrase how these unvaccinated service members are being treated. Let's reattack this, and let's at least fix the problem of our national security first, because that's the most pressing issue.
So he later, he also went on to say in that interview, which I encourage you to seek out, about recruitment is down and morale is down. And this absolutely has taken its toll on the military at a time when we can ill afford it, because whether we think we're at war or not, we are. So the defense budget that is on the table right now has this language written into it. It says that no later than 30 days after the date of this enactment of this act, the Secretary of Defense shall rescind the mandate of the armed forces that the armed forces be vaccinated against COVID-19 pursuant to the memorandum dated August 24th, 2021 regarding mandatory coronavirus disease 2019 vaccination of Department of Defense service members. This means that the vaccine mandate will be lifted, which is a victory, I would say, for those like the pilot Bowles who wanted this to be lifted. But it doesn't help anyone who was fired for refusing to comply, nor does it offer them, because this is a budget, right? Nor does it offer them any back pay, or reinstating with back pay. Lieutenant Bowles says that this has to happen. He says this on the matter: I personally will not rest on this issue until we have service members reinstated with back pay. We have to right the wrongs and restore trust. Just ending the mandate won't stop the disenfranchisement and harm done. Band-aid fixes won't correct the gaping readiness wound. So obviously this is not how you want members of your military to feel, people who are serving their country. He later said last night on Twitter, as he was following this, he said, this is still a win. Just the fact that they're willing to do this, it's just the first step, and they hope to continue to fight for their rights to not have been terminated without pay. So, question: why is this being shoved in the defense budget bill? Basically, it's a gimme to Republicans from Democrats. They're throwing them a bone, so to speak. Democrats want this new $847 billion defense budget for 2023. We've talked about how that was even more than the president asked for, but they wanted more shoved in there. Republicans were about to balk at the price tag, but they stood down after this mandate repeal was announced. White House Press Secretary Jean-Pierre, she says Republicans have decided they'd rather fight against the well-being of our troops, and that Democrats believe this is a mistake. Watch.
President, but every year, as you know, the NDAA has some provisions we support and some we do not. And what the president's going to do is he's going to judge this piece of legislation, this bill, on its entirety when that occurs. Again, there's a process moving, there's a process that's happening, and so we're going to let that happen in Congress. I will note, just to be very, very clear here, what we saw, what we think happened here is Republicans in Congress have decided that they rather fight against the health and well-being of our troops than protecting them. And we believe that it is a mistake. What we saw happen on the NDAA as it relates to the vaccine mandate. Making sure our troops are prepared and ready for service is a priority for President Biden. The vaccination requirement for COVID does just that. I'll add one more thing, just a little bit of a data point here, so all of you have this. Look, before COVID vaccine existed, nearly 700 Department of Defense personnel and service members died of COVID. Almost 100 of them were active duty. And so since this past spring, there has been one death due to COVID. So vaccinations work and save the lives of our service members. So we believe that it was a mistake.
Okay.
Someone in our chat points out the anthrax vaccine and what that did to our soldiers too. Tens of thousands of people affected by that vaccine. So we have a history of this, testing things on our soldiers.
Yes.
Hey, here go out to Bikini Atoll, which is where we're going to test the nuclear weapons, and just stand here. We want to see how this affects you. Hey, all you guys, just stand out here. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Nuclear explosion. We're going to watch you guys. Oh, okay. You guys all died of cancer? Great. Test complete.
And in fact, one of our friends who is military, retired now, when the vaccine was rolled out and we were sort of talking like, oh, are you going to get that? Are you going to get that? And she was like, her husband who is enlisted, she's like, he has to get so many vaccines that most people don't for the military. So what's one more? I think that was sort of their attitude on that. But again, I just want to press her. What is the rationale behind the mandate, though, given that now we have the switch of who is suffering from hospitalization and death from COVID and how the CDC is saying which population that is, given that we now know what the vaccine does regarding transmissibility? I don't understand, right? And in fact, now Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin told the Associated Press he is also not happy about this. He said, we lost 1 million people to the virus. 1 million people died in the United States of America, but we lost hundreds in the DOD, so this mandate has kept people healthy. Okay, that's correlation, not causation. You can't prove this yet. The data is unconfirmed since we have not seen the U.S. account for a distinction of people who died of COVID and people who died with COVID with comorbidities. We've seen some data come out around that. Other countries, such as Finland, has also done this and said, we counted COVID deaths with people who died within 30 days of a positive test. And now we're going back through it and we realize these people had comorbidities. They had a belbidivobidity. And so what they are saying now is that they are reassessing their COVID deaths down. We have not seen the United States do this. We probably never will. But also this statement also does not account for adverse effects. We ran down those claims in a lawsuit currently being litigated against the U.S. military when we did a show on Wednesday, November 2nd, if you'd like to seek that out. They were extensive. We looked at data from the Defense Medical Epidemiology Database, DMED, which is run by the Department of Defense, and it showed that the coding system that the military used to track healthcare of service members shows a huge increase in things like miscarriage, myocarditis, cancer, Bell's palsy, female infertility, and many other health conditions. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin hosted a panel about vaccine injuries in October, and he revealed these numbers of increased pathologies in the military. This was from a Senate panel. So now when you look at these increases, we realize we want to be level-headed. We can't establish a causality yet, but we also cannot celebrate a healthy military and establish that causality to the vaccine mandate either. We simply cannot. And so for us to say or surmise, that's foolhardy. We should not do that. But, again, causality is not, or correlation is not causation. And so we are seeing these at the same time as the vaccine mandate is still in place.
Keep that up there on the screen. That's unbelievable. I mean, ovarian dysfunction, 437% increase.
Yeah.
Migraines. And now we've heard a lot of this from pilots and other members of the military. And John told me in that interview, we're going to have that exclusively on Rumble this week. So you can watch that full interview with John. Testicular cancer, 369% increase.
Yeah. I have started to see, because I follow JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, that there are now studies that are starting to study other correlated factors of excess deaths since the pandemic. And so I think that we are going to start to see more and more studies of things that are in the radius, tangential.
Yeah.
For instance, one this week that came out that said that surmised that over 12% of excess deaths since the pandemic are alcohol related because so many people were stuck in their home and developed drinking problems. I don't know. I don't know if we'll get to, okay, that's 12%, but what about the rest, right? Are we going to get the other 88%? I don't know. And so, again, I just want to be level-headed because we can see these correlations. We cannot yet establish causality. But what we do know, what now the CDC knows, what now the White House knows, what every person knows is that the vaccine is not there to prevent transmissibility. We know this, and that there is no rationale for a mandate. So at the very least, that should be repealed across the board.
And it'd be great if they removed that from YouTube, too, because you can't even say that on YouTube about transmissibility.
I was just going to say.
It's not even allowed.
I was going to say, like, nobody's even talking about the... I can't even say it.
Yeah.
What I want to say. Like, I want to tell you something right now, but I can't say it because...
well, according to YouTube's rules, do you want to not say this? Okay, I see your face. Well, no. We'll talk about this later.
I'd rather not.
Okay.
We know what they, we'll wait till we get to Rumble here in a few minutes so we can actually, speak freely.
I'll just say that everything we did just say is okay on YouTube.
Good. Okay, good. So we've got more. Yeah, we'll talk more about that stuff in just a few moments, actually, on the vaccine front and blood as it relates to that on Rumble. So make sure that you're subscribed to our Rumble channel when we go over to our Rumble exclusive in a few moments. And we're going to talk about the Twitter files and the CDC and what they were doing covering up information on COVID on Twitter. Like, what? In these Twitter files, we keep getting some nuggets out of the first tranche of Twitter files. We're going to go over those in 1 second here. We're also going to look at this baby, poor baby Will in New Zealand. We've been covering this story out of New Zealand. It's just awful story. And family who wanted to get a blood transfusion for their baby, the state has now stepped in. We'll tell you where the story goes next. It's unbelievable. So you got to stick with us. That's going to be a Rumble exclusive here in a moment because we just can't talk about it on YouTube, unfortunately. Good luck trying to find any of that information on YouTube. You won't because it's censored and blocked. And we'll talk about gender surgery also there. But first,
we're going to tell you about our friends over at HelloFresh. Of course, it is the most festive time of the year, and HelloFresh is here to make the most of every moment, and every money. From holiday hosting to dinners during busy weeknights, you can count on HelloFresh to deliver fresh ingredients and seasonal recipes. Now, if you are like me and you're starting to meal plan for all of your holidays, that is a drudgery. If you can even take one meal off your plate where you don't have to collect ingredients, that is a win. And just think about ordering up everything for the holiday meal, and then it just shows up at your door and you don't have to go from store to store. Amazing. HelloFresh can help you eat better amid all of the holiday temptations. Their meals have 20% fewer calories than takeout, so you can still feel full and have all the flavor just without the guilt. As your calendar starts to fill up this season, you can count on HelloFresh to get you some of that free time back by making cooking simple and quick. Plus, when you make it yourself, there's also that feel-goodness about it, right? Because you're not ordering in, you know what's in it. You've done it yourself. Also, you've learned how to make something new, which is awesome. A lot of times I get these HelloFresh meals and then I add that to my repertoire, whether or not I'm going to order it again from HelloFresh if I have those ingredients. You've learned something, and that's amazing. With over 35 recipes available to choose from each week, there's something to please everyone, from family-friendly, fit and wholesome, or even veggie. Plus, you can easily customize your meals by swapping proteins or sides, upgrading your proteins, or even adding protein to a veggie meal. So go to HelloFresh.com/redacted18. Use our code redacted18 for 18 free meals plus free shipping. Once again, that's HelloFresh.com/redacted18. You'll get 18 free meals plus free shipping with our code redacted18. They are America's #1 meal kit.
All right, thanks to HelloFresh, and thanks to all of you for subscribing to the channel. There, we got a new rebel who just joined, the love of God. If you subscribe, your name will pop up here on the big screen. Our goal, we'd love to get to 1.5 million subscribers. maybe by the end of the week. It'd be awesome if we could. Our goal is, so we just need to add 10,000 more. So all you need to do is subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble. We just cracked 120,000, I believe, or 117,000 folks on Rumble following us. So, hey, the rebellion is growing, guys, and this is important. You know, I got a very nice email from somebody this morning that said they stopped watching the news after 9/11 because they realized like what phony stories they were being told by their broadcasters. And so our goal on this show is just to seek the truth wherever it takes us and cut through the propaganda and bring you the stories that the mainstream media does not cover. So please subscribe if you're new to the channel. One of those stories, go ahead.
Nothing.
Oh, yeah, you took a deep breath like you're going to say something important, something really important. I'm married to you, so I know when you're like going to say something important.
No.
No? Well, guess I don't know you at all.
I mean, I was going to just
maybe that was David.
Gently
I'm
move
kind of
you
married
along.
to David too, because
I'm muted, but I did make the same sound coincidentally.
Yeah.
But it's not because I had anything to say.
Picking up on your sounds. It is David's birthday today, by the way. He's our producer.
It is.
Say wish David a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And I've been getting people reaching out to me on Twitter and Facebook and everything. Thank you, everybody, so much for the birthday wishes. I really appreciate it.
They weren't able to do that to Philip because he stays anonymous online.
Yeah,
but I'm sure the sentiment was there too.
Philip is like the
you can look me up. I was gonna say you can look me up on Instagram and you'll see that my URL, my socials, it just says the internet.
Thank you.
That's where you can find me. If you want to find me to reach out for more, find me on the internet.
Philip is like the Unabomber of social media. Like you just can't find him anywhere. Thank you. We just got a nice $100 super chat. Thank you so much.
It was a Christmas wish.
It was a Christmas wish. Thank you so much. Let me see if I can read it here. It was from Avery R Network. Merry Christmas, y'all. Just in case I get a cluster bomb.
Oh, I hope you don't.
I hope you don't.
I hope nobody does. Literally nobody.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Do you notice I have Sharpie on my hand? In case you've noticed that.
Okay.
From doing Christmas errands.
Okay. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other?
Just was noticing that.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I got a text from the butcher today.
You have a skin tag you want to talk about?
No. Do you want to talk about?
Chapped lips, a stub toe, a hangnail.
We'll do that while we're waiting to move over to Rumble.
All right, let's get into it. So let's talk about this Twitter story because we got the first. Well, we're waiting the second tranche of Twitter files, right? We got the first one, the first of launch of Twitter files from Elon Musk. We're learning more details from that first drop, including just how deep the censorship around COVID and vaccines has gone. So how do you know the FBI? I mean, the FBI was meeting with Twitter on a weekly basis. We now know that, right? They were meeting with them on a weekly basis to help silence and censor content from political voices that they didn't agree with. A weekly basis. Like, it's our weekly meeting again with the FBI.
We know this from the documentation of, what's his name, Yoel Roth, that he submitted to the FCC, that he said began...
FEC, Federal Election Commission, FEC.
Was it? Okay. Yeah. That began in 2018.
Yeah. So weekly meetings with the FBI. So here's what we're going to work on, censor this week. So the Biden administration has been dodging the question and won't answer questions lately about it. Like they're like on lockdown about answering these questions. Peter Doocy, in a follow-up question, he was asking about Brittney Griner first, but then he followed up and asked her this question about the Twitter files. And why are you not allowed to talk about them? He asked her, watch.
Topic. You've said a few times that you really can't talk about communications between the Biden campaign and Twitter. Who is telling you that that's off limits?
I've already had that conversation with you, with your colleague, I believe yesterday. I've already addressed this multiple times this week, so I don't have anything more to add. Again, we've litigated this all week. Don't have anything to add.
So not a campaign.
I'm going to the back. I'm going to the back.
administration-
I'm going to the back. Go ahead.
On a different topic.
I'm going to the back of the room. I'm not going to take your questions anymore on this topic. Like, don't we not have an answer? I can't talk about that. I can't. Well, who told you can't talk about that? Is the White House legal counsel is telling you can't? Who's telling you can't talk about the Biden administration colluding with social media companies and censoring Americans' voices?
And when she
I think the better question.
Go ahead, birthday boy.
Yeah, I think the better question is to her is, okay, then who's writing in your book that when you turn to that page, who's writing what you're saying in that page?
Right.
That's a good question.
Yeah, did it come from the White House counsel? That's where it probably came from, the White House legal counsel.
And we'll know soon if there will be a next Biden campaign. And she will speak on behalf of that campaign.
Right.
And so can we ask her then?
Yeah, like I can't speak on behalf of the campaign because he wasn't president yet. Oh, okay.
That's the same.
But this portal continues. A month ago, we brought you the story about this backdoor portal. So it's still there regardless. And it happened during, forget the campaign. It happened during your administration, Corinne Jean-Pierre, where this Twitter partnership program exists, this backdoor portal that exists. Twitter had set up this backdoor portal with the federal government. So, which would allow approved government partners to flag content to Twitter for censorship. And apparently it didn't matter actually what department you worked in. Like as long as you had a government email address, that was it. You could be at the IRS. You could have been at the Census Bureau. No joke. You could have been at the CDC. As long as you had a government email address, that's all you needed. You could censor content at Twitter and Facebook. You would log in and do this.
So if I have a friend who works for the government, I can ask them to take down tweets I don't like about me.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe I'll try that.
Now, according to Tom Parker over at Reclaim the Net, he discovered emails that were released by the nonprofit organization in the America First Legal, in America First Legal, and shown Twitter enrolling a Center for Disease Control employee into this portal through their personal account. Like, oh, can I just log in with my personal account? I don't need a government. Oh, sure, we'll take care of that. So this was at Reclaim the Net today. Last year, on May 10th, 2021, the Center for Disease Control's Carol Crawford sent Twitter employee Todd O'Boyle a list of example posts highlighting 2 issues that we, the CDC, are seeing a great deal of misinformation about, he said, end quote. O'Boyle then responded by saying that enrolling in Twitter's partner portal is the best way for Crawford to get posts like this reviewed in the future. Here's the email from Todd O'Boyle. Oh boy. Hi, Carol. Thanks for sharing this. We agree that these are important trends to note. A quick scan shows that at least some of these have been previously reviewed and actioned. Meaning censored and blocked and banned and handled, right? I will now ask the team to review the others, he writes. Carol, remind me, did you have a chance to enroll in our partner support portal? In the future, that's the best way to get a spreadsheet like this reviewed. Just to put it in the partner portal for censorship from your government. Then the CDC, remember, this is the Center for Disease Control. In the middle of a pandemic, Crawford asked O'Boyle if she could enroll in the portal with her personal Twitter account. And on May 27th, 2021, O'Boyle confirmed that Crawford had been enrolled in the portal. Oh yes, there you go. Your account works fine. I'll proceed with processing your enrollment. And hey, does it need to be the CDC account or my personal? If CDC, then I'm going to have someone on the staff enroll instead of me. Oh, you don't want your name tied to censoring people? Oh, you can have one of your staff members do it. Hi, Carol. I'd be glad to enroll you in your partner support portal, which allows you a special expedited reporting flow in the Twitter Help Center. It works very well with the census. I worked very well with the census colleagues last year. Oh, you let a cat out of the bag. Wait a second. Last year, when people were complaining about the census, because of the political nature of the census last year, there were people complaining on Twitter. And oh, you mean census employees also contacted Twitter to censor American voices? Ah, thanks for that little nugget you just revealed. So in other emails, Crawford asked O'Boyle whether the federal government could flag COVID misinformation on the portal using existing census.gov accounts that have already access to the portal. Like, hey, this is amazing. Just take a step back. Sorry, can we use the census emails that I've already set up in the Twitter portal? Can we use the census accounts so that we can also censor COVID tweets? Like, we just want to use, because they're already set up. They were censoring other stuff unrelated. Can we?
That was during the Trump years. The census.
It was 2020. Every 10 years.
Right. It began during the Trump years, and the people complaining about the census were mostly Democrats. So, that's interesting because we were told that it was mostly Republican voices that were censored. So I'd like to see more about that.
I don't know that it was, refresh my memory. I think the anger was about
undercutting people of color and people of lower socioeconomic status.
It was about the immigration status. They added immigration status to the census, and that was supposed to be irrelevant.
Right.
That was the big fight.
That's right. Yeah. So are you here illegally? Basically was the question. Like, are you?
Yes, but Democrats were accusing Trump of shutting down the census too early.
Right.
Before, doing extra outreach in order to undercut Democratic registrations, in order to not allow Democratic regions representation.
Right, like gerrymandering districts, right? Because
yes.
That's all based on the census.
And so
exactly.
That's interesting because then was it Democratic voices who were censored for saying these things? That's
we'll have to wait and see.
That would be hard to believe, but I'm open to hearing that.
Well, we did hear from Elon, or we did hear from the Twitter files last week that there were both members, both administrations, but then I don't think there was any evidence. I don't know. We'll still have to see on the Trump side of this. Like, was there anyone from the Trump administration on that side? I haven't seen it yet, but.
Well, also, if I could, real quick, just because there's a Republican president or a Democratic president doesn't mean that the other political party goes away or doesn't have access to these things. Like, it's not just coming down from the president. So any political party, there's people that are Republican and Democrat in the CDC.
Yes.
So it's like they still have access to this. So you could have a Republican president and still be pushing to censor Republican voices if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, and a lot of these people have been. We know, like Dr. Fauci, right? He's been there. He's been at the government since the 80s. So he, president after president after president, doesn't really matter. I would love to see these census tweets. I would love to know what was censored on the census side. So that's a good point. In other emails, though, on the COVID side, Crawford asked O'Boyle whether the federal government could flag COVID misinformation in the portal using the existing census.gov accounts and that have access. So we're going to go in after COVID content now. And last week I had a chance to ask Elon Musk this question directly on the show. I asked Elon specifically about this Twitter partnership portal, and it sounded like he didn't know a lot about it, but he was going to look into it. And here is that exchange. Watch. Hey, thanks, Elon. One of the stories we've been covering on our show over the past couple of months is Dr. Shiva's lawsuit. He was banned from Twitter running for the Senate from Massachusetts, and one of the things in his lawsuit that was uncovered was the back-end government portal to both Facebook and Twitter, the trusted Twitter partnership. And I know on Twitter's blog that trusted Twitter partnership between Twitter and someone with a government email address can reach out to Twitter and basically have accounts banned, taken down. Is that portal, is that trusted partnership still available to the government? And given what you've released in the Twitter files, does it make sense for that to still be there?
I got to dig into this trusted partnership thing. Obviously that has some Big Brother vibes. Twitter will adhere to the law, but it will not do. It's not going to go beyond the laws. And if there are laws that don't seem to be in the interest of the people, then Twitter will push to change the laws to be in the interest of the people. But I'll dig into this trusted partnership thing, find out what's going on.
So we had these emails from June of 2021, also showing another CDC employee attempting to enroll in the Facebook portal, the backdoor portal at Facebook, getting error messages. While these emails don't describe the portal, it appears to be Facebook's content takedown portal, which of course is similar to the Twitter portal and also allows the government agencies to flag content for censorship. And there's more, of course. There's a head of public policy, Peyton Imhe, asking Crawford whether she's aware of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's misinformation work. Like, hey, are you aware of, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is actively involved in the censoring stuff. Are you aware of that? because I saw that DHS has planning possibly working on some COVID misinformation, so maybe we at the CDC don't have to do it. The DHS is going to do it. The email, interestingly, was 1 year before we heard about the Nina Jankowicz Disinformation Governance Board that was to be set up by the Department of Homeland Security. So that was all smokescreen, right? Because they were already doing it. The Department of Homeland Security was already censoring people, even before we were hearing about this Disinformation Governance Board. Why is there not more context and coverage of this in the mainstream media? They're ignoring this story. But that to me is a huge part of this story, because we were being told that this was going to be set up, and Congress struck it down, was like, no way, you're not doing this. Are you crazy? There was massive backlash, but they were doing it anyway. Ted Cruz was on. Go ahead.
Do you think maybe they felt guilty? They created the Disinformation Board because they felt guilty for doing it in the shadows, and they're like, well, if we come clean, then maybe we can,
we won't be caught.
Absolve ourselves of our sins, and then we can go right back to doing exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
No one will look at the dates on when this thing started. It'll be there all along. Nina Jankowicz can do her little TikTok dances, and that'd be good. So Ted Cruz was asked about this, and he thinks this is like high treason. Listen.
What Elon Musk has released is evidence of corruption that goes to the highest level of government, it goes to the highest level of the FBI, and it goes to the highest level of big tech. We've known for a long time that big tech is censoring conservatives, but what Elon did here is he just laid naked all of the lies that the corporate media has told, because it's clear during the 2020 election, over and over and over again, the Biden campaign and the DNC would reach out to their buddies at Twitter and say, hey, we don't like this, and their response is handled, and they take it down over and over and over again. And in particular, all of the exchange back and forth when the Hunter Biden laptop story broke, it was evidence that the leadership at Twitter knew within hours that their ridiculous fake excuse that it was hacked was a ridiculous fake excuse. Even James Baker, who you just noted there, had been the FBI's general counsel, then was at Twitter. Even he acknowledged, well, gosh, we don't have the evidence on this, but it doesn't matter. Let's block it anyway. And in fact, one of the exchanges back and forth, they reveal the reason, which is they say we want to avoid what happened in 2016, Donald Trump winning. This was all about weaponizing big tech. It is absolutely corrupt. And what is amazing is the Democrats were fully in on it. The corporate media was fully in on it. And Elon's released the receipts, which shows all of them are willing to abuse power to stay in power.
Wow. So we're waiting on the second tranche of Twitter files. We're waiting on patiently, because now we know, now with James Baker being removed from Twitter, scrubbing it of any mention of the FBI. Miranda Devine, of course, who broke the story initially on the Hunter Biden laptop story at the New York Post, she said she was the first one to call this out and say, there's something missing here. They've scrubbed this. There's no mention of the FBI in these files. They're gone, missing, like clear manipulation. So we're going to see maybe the full breadth of this, hopefully in this next tranche of Twitter files. So let us know your thoughts on that in the comments below. We've got more news to get to, but we're going to do it on Rumble because we cannot talk about these next stories here on YouTube. They will censor us, ban us, block us. So what I'd love for all of the 20,000 of you who are watching over on YouTube right now, it's very simple to do. See right there on the screen, just go to rumble.com/redacted, download their app, jump in, find our channel, click on the live stream. We'll just wait for a second here as you convert over, but very simple to do. Go to rumble.com/redacted. We're going to cover this baby William story out of New Zealand, and this really disgusting story where the state is basically trying to take the baby away because the family wants a blood transfusion, and the way that they're doing it is just awful. We're also going to talk about gender. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. A doctor is doing research on how to build a phallus out of a clitoris. And we're going to tell you about that because there is no standard for phalloplasty. It's an experimentation. Would you like that on the genitals of somebody that you loved? We're going to explain it to you. And I'm going to teach you something, you boys.
Okay.
A little bit about how the clitoris works. Because...
Well, speak for yourself.
I will be speaking for myself.
Some of us know how it works.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you better hope she doesn't speak for you.
No, that's true.
You better hope she speaks for herself.
I come with reresearch.
Some of us have written a whole book on the subject.
You have not written a book.
Come over and listen to my podcast. It's called Clitoris Corner. I don't know.
No, that one didn't work.
I'm going to start that podcast.
It's an alliteration.
It's a clitoration.
Okay.
All right, let's move on over to Rumble. Everyone, come on over right now at rumble.com/redacted. All right. Thank you, YouTube. Love to all of you on YouTube, and we will see you back here again real soon. But we can't be censored, so we need to go to Rumble. Bye, everyone. On